Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're bringing you a special Hintergrundbericht, a real background report, and a deep dive into a phrase that has literally echoed across the entire world over the last couple of years. We're going to unpack the globally recognized slogan, Woman, Life, Freedom, using only the direct source materials to guide our journey. We'll explore exactly where it came from, how it evolved, and why it resonates so deeply across so many different cultures and continents today.
Now, you've almost certainly heard these words, Zan Zendegi Azadi in Persian, or Jin Jian Azadi in Kurdish. This incredibly powerful chant became an international rallying cry during the massive 2022 protests in Iran following the death of Gina Mahsa Amini. It was chanted in the streets, printed on front pages, and shared millions of times online. But today, we're going to look past the modern headlines. We're going to dive into the hidden origins of this movement to understand the decades of history and struggle that actually forged those three simple words.
Section 1. A worldwide slogan. Okay, let's dive into this. The journey of this slogan across the globe is, honestly, just truly remarkable. While it really exploded into mainstream awareness in late 2022, its international presence actually started much earlier. Way back in November 2015, the slogan was already being used at European rallies marking the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Fast forward to September 2022, and it becomes the defining chant in Iran, quickly spreading to neighboring Afghanistan where women chanted it in solidarity. By October 2022, the slogan was literally front-page news, featured right on the cover of the French newspaper Libération, and quoted directly by top politicians in Germany. And the resonance hasn't stopped. As recently as August 2024, the chant was adopted during protests in India following the tragic murder of a female doctor in Kolkata. It has absolutely transcended borders.
Section 2. The historical roots. It's time to take a breath and go underwater, right to the bottom of the iceberg, to examine where this movement actually started.
According to our sources, the slogan has incredibly deep roots in the history of the Kurdish women's movement, which itself emerged from a long history of resisting suppression across multiple state borders in the Middle East. Let's trace it back. As early as 1926, we see pioneers like Hafsa Shan. She played a crucial role in establishing the first girls' school in Suleymaniye, literally going door to door to convince parents to educate their daughters. Decades later, jumping to 1978, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, was formed in direct response to severe state suppression and the denial of Kurdish identity in Turkey. By the late 1980s, a major ideological shift began taking place within the movement regarding women's roles. And, well, by the 1990s, this evolved into something totally unprecedented: the formation of an autonomous women's army out in the mountains.
Now, what's really interesting about this is the profound ideological shift going on here. In the older, traditional Marxist and real socialist view, the core belief was that once a class revolution was successful, women would just automatically be freed as a byproduct. But the Kurdish women's movement, spurred on by figures like Abdullah Öcalan, fundamentally rejected this. They argued that gender issues cannot simply take a back seat to class or ethnic conflicts. To achieve true liberation, women needed to organize autonomously. They couldn't just be a secondary consideration. And this brings us to a really vivid metaphor from Kurdish activist Sakina Taina. She explained their intersectional approach by saying, revolution is like an ocean with different rivers. The women's movement is a very important part, but if you sacrifice all the other important parts for certain political interests or a single ideological direction, the project will fail. It's just a powerful way to illustrate that true societal change absolutely requires honoring and integrating the struggles of women, not postponing them for later.
But of course, abstract theories had to be put into practice, and it wasn't easy. Our source text shares a striking micro-story about the women guerrillas. You see, when they separated their camps from the men to establish their own military leadership in the mountains, a lot of people were skeptical. Tech Arena notes that when two people walk together and one knows the way, the other doesn't learn. To truly learn, the women had to navigate alone. During their first winter by themselves, they had to quickly learn how to chop wood and build houses just to survive the freezing cold. And they did. Surviving that first winter alone proved, without a doubt, that they could exist entirely outside traditional patriarchal structures.
Section 3. Women in Armed Struggle. Let's transition into the military application of this ideology.
This brings us to the YPJ, or the Women's Protection Units. Formed in 2012, this is the all-female military branch of the YPG in Syria. The YPJ gained massive international fame for their fierce and highly effective combat against ISIS, particularly during the grueling Battle of Kobané. Their courage on the front lines drew global attention, And their ranks actually even included non-Kurdish international volunteers from places like the UK and Canada who traveled all the way to Syria specifically to join their fight.
So, the crucial point here is the sheer scale of this mobilization. We aren't talking about a small symbolic unit, not at all. Estimates place the number of female fighters in the YPGA anywhere from 33,750 up to 50,000 women. These women undergo rigorous military training with heavy weaponry, but equally important, they receive extensive education in women's and human rights.
And that really highlights the impact of those numbers on the broader military structure. Women in the YPJ make up roughly a third, and by some estimates up to 40% of the entire YPG fighting force. This is a massive structural integration of women into the core defense and decision-making apparatus of the region.
Section 4. The Faces of Oppression. Let's shift from the mountains back to the political and sociological theories developed by the movement.
In the Kurdish regions, oppression rarely comes from just one direction. Sakina Tena explains a concept known as the 4Ks. This represents how different identities layer together to create a multifaceted, fourfold oppression. If you are Kadin, which means a woman, Kurdish, a communist holding alternative political ideologies, and Kazilbash, belonging to the Alevi religious minority, you are fighting marginalization on 4 distinct fronts simultaneously. This is exactly why the movement insists that the fight for freedom must be equally diverse and intersectional.
Because of this layered oppression, the movement actively rejects the idea of feminism as some sort of elite club. Tehrona uses the beautiful metaphor of a yelpaze, or a fan, to describe their diversity. The movement values the academic just as much as the illiterate woman from a remote village. They recognize that a woman who cannot read can still perfectly describe what freedom means based entirely on her own lived experience of patriarchal violence. It's a deeply inclusive approach to liberation.
Let's move to Kurd and see how this builds into everyday political reality. The movement took these abstract theories and implemented concrete, radical parliamentary policies. For instance, the system of co-mayorships ensures that every single political office is shared by exactly one man and one woman. They implemented strict 50% quotas for representation. And perhaps most notably, they instituted a policy regarding domestic violence, where, if a man is abusive to his wife, his wages are automatically rerouted and paid directly to her. While this might not change deep-seated mentalities overnight, it drastically and immediately shifts the power dynamics in society.
Section 5. Solidarity across borders. Let's guide this back to the modern day, connecting the Kurdish history back to the global stage.
The core argument of the source material here is that violence against women is not just a regional issue. It's not limited to one ethnicity, religion, or country. According to Tena, wherever there is a masculinist mentality, there is violence. The form might look different. For example, in Europe, physical violence might happen more behind closed doors rather than in the public square. But the underlying mentality of power and control, it's exactly the same. That is why the struggle absolutely must be global.
To really underline the severe global nature of this reality, our sources cite a staggering statistic from sociologist Pinar Salik. When looking at the causes of unnatural deaths globally, the largest group perishes in wars, but the second largest group? Femicides. The murder of women. This horrific reality is why international solidarity isn't just a nice ideal, it's a desperate, life-or-death necessity. And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this explainer. Reflecting on the struggles of women, Sakina Tena asks a deeply provocative question. When does the war begin? Her answer? When you cannot speak. When there is no room for your voice, conflict is basically inevitable. Woman, life, freedom isn't just a slogan. It is the fundamental demand to have a voice, to exist safely, and to be free from a mentality of oppression. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into the source material. I really hope this background report leaves you thinking about the vital connections between having a voice, freedom, and the outbreak of conflict. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.